hosted by Kara. Joining us today, we have Jennifer England. Let me show you Jennifer. Say hi, Jennifer. Hi. She's from La Bella Torta in Virginia, and she's going to be my moderator, co-host today, helping me get questions answered that you guys might be having. On the left-hand side of your chat box, if you're inside the chat room, you can chat away with Amber. I also have another special guest. I'm sorry, Amber Adamson from Top Tier Cakes. She's going to be joining us a little bit later, talking about her fabulous cake she just did using my acrylic method. She's in the chat room. She can chat with you. And Jennifer's in the chat room. She can chat with you. And I'm here, and I'm going to be demoing and answering your questions. Okay. So, can we see that, Jen?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. My workstation here. If you came and watched the live tutorial on the buttercream round cake, it's basically the same method that I'm using. There are some differences when it comes to squares that I will be showing you today, and we'll talk about some other things that we didn't address in the last live webcast. Okay, so we're going to get started because I'm also going to show you guys how I put fondant over a beautifully squared cake. Alrighty, so to start, I always like a really good turntable. Get a good professional grade turntable. The other ones, the name brand ones that we all know, I always find that it jerks around and it stops and it's not a smooth spin. This one is a very smooth spin. You need a prep board. If you can get one of these lovely prep boards, they're actually, I got this one from Tap Plastic, but I believe my friends over at Cake Safe, Julie and Scott at cakesafe.com, can help you with getting some of these prep boards in different sizes that you need. This was a 12-inch by 12-inch prep board, square, and it is sturdy. It's pretty much like a cutting board surface, and I use it for lots of different reasons, but mainly to prep my cakes. I'm going to put that down on my board. Non-skid, you can get these at the dollar store. They come in a roll. It's shelf liner. So I just cut squares or circles to fit perfectly underneath whatever size acrylic I'm using. Today I'm going to do a 5-inch square cake. This is a 5.5-inch square acrylic. I have 2 of them. So you need 2 exact acrylics for whatever size cake that you're doing. You don't need to use 2. There's lots of people out there that only use 1. I just like 2 because I just think it's easier to have 2. I know that some people will use 1 and then cut a cardboard or a foam core to the exact match and use that as the bottom of their cake. But my method, I use 2. So you use a set. So I'm going to take my non-skid and one of my acrylics, and I'm going to place that over so that you don't have any hangout. You don't want anything getting in the way or grabbing the hold of your bench scraper. So you want to make sure that your non-skid is not coming out or peeking out. And then you're going to need your parchment paper. I cut this to be slightly smaller than, ever so slightly smaller than my acrylic. So you can see there's just a little bit of overhang, and also because I don't want it to come out over the edges of my acrylic because I don't want it to snag. But I wanted to cover most of the surface so that we can get this acrylic off of our cake later. So putting that down. Now here is a trick that someone had mentioned last class to help keep this parchment paper down because we're not going to tape it. We don't tape it or anything like that. So I'm going to use a little bit of water and just spritz my acrylic. Uh-oh. Get the spritzer going. That's not where I'm spraying my, there we go. Just spritz it a little bit with a little bit of water. Maybe that was a little bit too much. And then this water will help hopefully hold down your parchment paper. Okay, if that doesn't work, you can always do my method, which is use another finished paper. So I have my buttercream here. I'm using Swiss Meringue buttercream. This particular buttercream is the Lauren Kitchen's recipe, and I promise I'm going to mail you guys all a PDF of all of the links and recipes that I used. So my apologies, I didn't get that in time right now, but I will do that, I promise, I promise. So this is a Lauren Kitchen's recipe. I love this recipe because it's just really easy. You don't have to cook your egg whites because in her recipe she uses ultra pasteurized egg whites from a carton, so you don't have to do the cooking part. And we use powdered sugar instead of regular granulated sugar. Very easy, and I did this actually maybe a half an hour before we started today. So it's beautiful. And I used pink this time, not white. Woohoo! Okay, so I'm going to put a very large dollop of buttercream right in the center of my paper. And I'm going to tell you right now, this water trick isn't really working. So you can try it if you want. It's not really working right now. I put a lot of buttercream to begin with because I really just want to make sure that I cover up the entire surface of my acrylic. And I have a good cushioned amount of buttercream for my cake to rest on when I flip it over. I'm going to anchor my parchment paper down because I don't want it to move its position. I don't want it to scoot off and overhang. So I'm going to anchor it down. We were hoping the water was going to do that, but not so much. And I'm pushing. Jennifer, please tell me if there's something that is not showing up very clearly.
It looks good to me.
Okay, so I'm just, there we go. I made sure that my parchment paper didn't move. And I'm just spreading a nice even layer. And now you can't even see the acrylics at all. That's what we want. The buttercream is going to keep the acrylics down for us, or I'm sorry, the parchment paper down for us. So now that we've gotten this step, what I want to do is I want to go back and find my acrylics, or my one acrylic, I should say. So I'm going to find and scrape down the side to reveal the edge of my acrylic. Okay, so now I can see, can you see? You can see my acrylic?
I can.
Now? Okay, great. So I'm just going to even that out a little bit. Now the reason behind, again, putting so much on this acrylic is because this is going to be really the frosting for the top of our cake. So my method uses the upside down method. And we'll talk about flipping your cakes, when to flip your cake, when not to flip your cake. And if you can't flip your cake, another way to go about it in a little bit. So, but we're going to show you the upside down method for cakes, typically 12 inches or smaller. Okay, so I have already stacked, filled, and crumb coated a 5-inch square cake. It is sitting on a 5-inch square cake board. And here's a good trick about square cakes. Bake them in sheet pans and cut your cardboard to the size that you need and use that to cut your cake layers out of a sheet pan. Very easy, very fast, and you don't have to buy a whole lot of pans. So this is frozen. I like to work with frozen cake because it just is easier to handle when it's frozen like that. I mean, hello, who wants to play catch? You don't have to freeze it, but it does have to be very firmly chilled from the refrigerator, so at least give yourself a couple of hours, if not overnight, before you do this method, so that when you go to flip it, it's just that easy. So, again, it does not have to be frozen, but it does have to be very chilled. Also, freezing it will help set up this buttercream a little bit faster, too. So, I've flipped it over. That's the bottom of our cake, and I'm going to place it, do my best to place it in the middle of the acrylic. And then I'm going to press down, because now is where I'm going to try to level my cake. Get one of these. You can find these at Lowe's or Home Depot or any hardware supply store. It's just a simple leveler, and you can see the bubble. We want to make sure that bubble stays in the middle. So I place that on my cake. It looks good from that angle. I'm going to turn it one revolution and measure the other side. It's off. It's on this side, which means I need to push down on that side a little bit more until it gets in the middle. It's in the middle now. I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to measure the corners. It's off. It's over on this side, so I have to push down and get it centered. I'm going to turn it on the next corner, and we're in the middle. And I'm going to go back and test one more time. Doing my best not to move the cake off center. Okay, we're good. We're square. Do we see that? We see that beautiful bubble in the middle?
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. So we're done with that. Now the next step you do is all of the squished out buttercream that has come out from us pushing down on our cake and getting it level. We're going to bring that up on the side. All the way around. This helps keep that cake locked into the level position. I'm going to take my bench scraper. Oh, I forgot to tell you about these beautiful bench scrapers. I'm sure you guys know this by now, and if you don't, Fat Girl Cakes bench scrapers. Google Fat Girl Cakes bench scraper, and it'll send you directly to a link where you can purchase this beautiful 8-inch one or this beautiful 10-inch, and I believe she even has a 12-inch. So get them. Don't cheat yourself. Get these bench scrapers. Okay, back to work. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to follow back along and reveal my acrylic, clean up my board a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to clean up this extra buttercream from when I crumb coated my cake off my board. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the second acrylic onto the cake. And how we do that is you take a little bit of buttercream and put it in the middle of your cake board. just enough to get your acrylic to stick. So, doing my best, I'm going to center this around my cake. Now, how do we test to see that both acrylics are lined up perfectly? This is a very important step and quite different in how I do it with a round cake. So what you want to do is get 2 bench scrapers. On one side, you want to make sure that the bottom of your bench scraper is sitting flat on the board, and you want to make sure that it's touching both the top and the bottom acrylic. You can't see that, but it's just a hair short of touching this top one. So I'm going to go directly across in the middle of the of this particular side, directly across. I'm going to tap it in and hold it. I'm going to also, when I do that, I want you to pull your hands out. Do not scrape along the side, because you're basically going to be moving that acrylic, and we don't want to. We want to tap it in and pull out. Then you're going to come to the corner of the same side and directly across, tap and hold, pull out. To the back corner, tap and hold, pull out. Now I want to show you. If you look, this side over here is a little too far over, and there's too much room on the other side. Can you see that, Jen?
I can.
So I need to adjust my cake. How am I going to do that? I'm going to take one hand. Basically, I need to move this cake over ever so slightly this direction. So I'm going to anchor the bottom acrylic by holding it in place. And I'm going to take my other hand and I'm going to move the cake. And I mean ever so, oh, it barely moved. Barely, barely moving. So don't have a heavy hand. So I'm going to go back, check, front corner, check, back corner, check. And again in the middle. Now we're good. Turn my cake. In the middle of the second side. We're way off. Oh boy. That's way off. So again, anchoring down with one acrylic and ever so gently pushing my cake over to the corrected side. Go back and check. Front, back. Back to the center. And now I have to go back to the other side and check again one last time. Make sure they're all evened up. And just because I'm a little OCD, one last check. Okay, we're good. That's how you square up the 2 square acrylics. Very different from a round, obviously. So now what I'm going to do is I need to seal this acrylic onto my cake. And by doing that, I'm going to very gently take a little bit of buttercream on the tip of my offset spatula, and I'm not going to touch this acrylic because I don't want it to move. I'm going to push buttercream underneath that acrylic to seal up the gap. and being very careful not to touch or move my acrylic. I'm just pushing the buttercream. Let me lift my camera so you can see. Jen, is that good?
Yep, sure can.
So you can see where I have to continue all the way around that top edge to seal in my buttercream. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to allow this cake to chill. Again, just being very cautious and careful that when you're doing this particular step, you do not move your acrylics from after we've lined them up. We want to keep them there. This is going to help do that. So I have a saying called inside and outside of the acrylic zone. We've got some buttercream kind of hanging out outside of the acrylic zone. So I'm going to very gently scrape that down. Again, being cautious. With buttercream is very different from ganache. Ganache sets up very quickly, and so it'll usually help seal in all your acrylics and keep them in place nicely. With buttercream, not so much. So you have to be more gentle using acrylics with buttercream. I'm just very carefully going to scrape down. And why I do this is because when I go put it back in the freezer, I don't want the buttercream to harden up outside of the acrylic zone because it's a little more difficult to scrape down. So I'm just gently scraping down all sides. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the freezer and we'll have a little time to chat.
Oh, girl, that cake was so hard because this is what I do. This is my MO. I take an order and I muddle through it and I think, yeah, I can totally rock out a square cake for you. I totally could not rock out a square cake. So I did everything backwards from what you did in the tutorial, and then finally I caved and I got the tutorial, and now that I'm watching you do it, it's so much easier doing it the right way and paying somebody that's been there, done that, and to see easier steps to do it rather than just kind of muck and muddle your way through. It was a mess, and it was very hard, and then I saw, you know, kind of how you were doing it, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's so brilliant. So I used your acrylics, and I'm telling you, normally it would take me, you're going to laugh, it would take me probably 8 hours to sit and straight a cake up, but with the acrylics it took probably, oh, I don't know, an hour tops for the whole process. So it was pretty amazing.
Wow, so it only took you an hour to do all of the cakes that way?
Yeah, yeah. And normally it would take me a lot longer. That was a 10, 8, and a 6. And so, yeah, just using the acrylics, that right there is life-changing because, you know, you try so hard, even with a bench scraper, to get it so straight, and you just sit and fuss and fuss and fuss and try to get it straight, and there's just really no guideline. With the acrylics, you know, you have that guideline to keep you straight, and then there's really no room for too much error. I think.
Thank you. I tried to tell people, you know, funny thing, someone on one of the Facebook boards said, why are people using acrylics? That's just a crutch. You should learn how to, nobody knows how to cake decorate these days. And I thought, well, yes, I'm sure many of you guys know how to ice a cake without acrylics. We've been doing it for so long. However, with the idea of acrylics, it just makes sense. And it's just, as Amber indicated, once you put the acrylics on, they guide your bench scraper and they do the work for you. and you don't have to keep guessing. You don't have to keep, a lot of times when I'm working really fast, I kind of forget about where my hand is, and sometimes my hand is kind of tilted up or out, or I don't know. It's just not level, and you can spend way more time than you need to trying to make it perfect. And if you're like myself and Jennifer, and I'm sure Amber is the same, with wanting things to look perfect, it can get quite frustrating. So having the acrylics really do help with that. Let's talk about buttercream. I use Swiss meringue, I would say 90% of the time. I do use American buttercream, but I don't use shortening. I use all butter-based buttercreams, and both have worked successfully for me. I have used a bucket of Sam's buttercream before using my method, and it has worked as well. So I believe with pretty much all buttercreams, maybe not so much cream cheese, this method will work. Amber, what buttercream did you use on that cake?
I always use Italian buttercream. Just, that's my go-to. I always end up using that, and it just works so well with it because it's just so creamy. It doesn't really, I guess I'm just spoiled to the consistency as far as the decorator, and I like the taste too. I do American, but I don't like the grainy texture, and from my personal taste, I don't particularly like the American, but it's whatever the customer wants. So, I mean, if they want American, by gum, they're getting American cake.
Exactly. Jennifer, what do you use?
I use exclusively Swiss meringue. The only time I use American is to fill something like a buttermilk spice. I'll use an American cream cheese buttercream, but only as the filling, not on the outside, because it has too much drag. I do not enjoy the flavor of American buttercream. Just like Amber, it's a preference for me. I think everybody has a different preference, but I just like how smooth it is. It's easy to work with. I much prefer meringue-based buttercream.
Yes, I do too. I really don't like the grittiness or the sweetness of American, but if my customer wants it, I will give it to them. Most of the time I do use Swiss. I saw a question just now. Someone says, I use the SMBC recipe and 2 pounds of butter. Is that correct? Yes. It's very buttery. But, some people I have heard said that it is too buttery for their taste. The Lauren Kitchen's recipe uses 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract, which I think helps cut the buttery taste quite a bit. It's delicious to me. However, if you feel that it's too buttery, then there are other Swiss meringue buttercreams out there that will, I think I've heard people say, oh, they cut the butter down. I don't know by how much because I didn't follow it too much because I love mine. But they said cutting the butter down or adding a little more sugar helps with that. So tweak and find out what works for you. But yes, the recipe that was given, Lauren Kitchen's recipe, does use 2 pounds of butter to 1 pound of powdered sugar and a half cup of pasteurized egg whites and 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract. You can also use Swiss meringue and flavor it with strawberry, raspberry, lemon, salted caramel, peanut butter, chocolate, Oreo cookies, vanilla bean paste, pretty much anything. I will say that final buttercream coat, unless it's an sort of a extract flavoring, I would steer away from using, although I have used strawberry for my strawberry Swiss meringue for my last coating. It worked out fine, but some of them may not work as great. So fill the cake with whatever filling or flavoring that the customer wants, and then that final coating, you want to maybe just use a vanilla flavored Swiss meringue for that final coat. Oh, my timer went off, so I think we'll pull the cake out and do the next step. Wait, do I see any more questions before I move on? I thought I saw one. Oh, someone asked, have you ever mixed the two? I don't know what two you're speaking of, Lisa.
American and meringue.
What shows it again, Jen?
I think what they're saying is American and meringue. I have heard that some people, to get it a little bit sweeter but still have more of the workability of meringue, will use half and half American buttercream and Swiss meringue buttercream. I've not, but I have heard that some people do that.
I have done that out of needing a little more buttercream, and I didn't want to make more. I had a little bit left of American buttercream vanilla and a little bit of Swiss meringue vanilla, and I added them together, and they worked beautifully. It still tasted wonderful, and so yes, you can do that. Okay, so let's move back to demo time. And get my cake. Okay, so my cake is now set up and it's solid. It's not coming off my hand, so I'm going to move on to filling in the sides of the cake. Here's where you want to put in a lot of buttercream, and you want to cover your acrylics. You want buttercream outside of the acrylic zone. Don't be scared to put a lot. Also, be very mindful that you're pushing the buttercream into the cake. We want to make sure there are no air pockets, no air bubbles that are going to bite us later. We don't like those things. So I'm just making sure I have a good coverage all the way around. Pushing, pushing, pushing. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to worry about the corners just yet. I'm actually just going to scrape down the sides of my cake down to where I can see both acrylics. I'm going to leave the corners like that for now. And on each side, and again, you need to be mindful of not putting a lot of pressure on those acrylics because they could still slip. If you watched the last one, I had a cake slip on me and I had to readjust it. And we'll talk about how to readjust it. Oh, let me show you what happened here. I have some cake peeking out. When I cut my cake layers, I cut them slightly larger than 5 inches because I do find that with square cakes, the half sizes sometimes can just be a bit too much buttercream. So I cut my cake layers slightly more than 5 inches, but when you do that, this problem occurs. So what I'm going to do, oh, look at that. I have pink on me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that cake down a little bit because I don't want to see any cake peeking out. And because this is our final coating, you just kind of be careful so you can scrape down any crumbs and get those out of there. Okay, so now I have a big hole. So, again, I'm just making sure you cover it enough so that there is no exposed cake showing. and getting out any crumbs. Okay, so back to scraping down. Much better. So I'm scraping down, revealing the two acrylics, leaving my corners alone for now. Last side. Because my cake started off frozen and I keep going in and out of the freezer, the buttercream sets up pretty firmly, so I really am doing somewhat of a scraping motion. You do not have to have a frozen cake like I mentioned before, and you do not have to put it in the freezer. The freezer is just faster. It takes a lot longer to chill up and firm up your cake in the refrigerator than the freezer, so that's the only reason why I'm using the freezer, but you don't have to if you have more time. Okay, now we've got the sides scraped down to where you can see both acrylics, top and bottom, but the corners not so much. I have a nice build up there though. So what I want to do now, and here's the trick about how I do my corners, and you're going to have to just get your cake out and try it. But I'm going to try to explain it to you as best I can. Right about here is where I'm going to lay my bench scraper on the corners of my acrylics. So the top acrylic and the bottom acrylic are going to be touching. And when I mean by corners, I mean this corner. So I'm going to find my corners. Can you see that, Jen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I am going to press, again, being mindful not to press so much that I'm going to move my acrylics, but enough of pressure. So this is something where you just have to get in there and try it and figure it out for yourself. I'm going to angle back, making sure I'm holding on to those two corners. I'm going to pull, and as soon as my corners clear the edge of my bench scraper, I'm going to pull out. So we see that. And I'm going to clean my scraper. Now here's where you have to switch hands. Going back on the same corner in the other direction, laying my two corners about, what is that, a ½ inch into my scraper. I'm laying my corners. I'm pulling back. And as soon as they clear the edge of my scraper, I'm going to come off. Is that pretty or what, Jen?
That is gorgeous.
That's how we do a corner. So there's a little bit of cleanup to do. So I'm going to go back. Same thing. Coming off, using my corner, and pulling out. Come back around. Flip. Over. Pull out. I can't really see. Is that showing up?
It is for me, yes.
Okay, it looks pretty beautiful from here. So again, we've got 3 more corners to do. Binding about a ½ inch. And I have a lot of buttercream here, so I'm kind of smashing that in to find my other corner. And with enough pressure, but not so much I'm going to move, I'm coming off.
Can you take a question?
Yep.
2, 1, is SMBC safe to use in the summer? And 2, how long do you leave your SMBC sitting out, the Lauren Kitchens recipe?
Well, Lauren says you can leave it out for 2 weeks. I don't know about that. I'm sure it's possible because it is butter. butter is such high in fat that, you know, it can be left out. I don't. I will make my buttercream, say, Wednesday, and I will leave it out if I know I'm going to need it later. I will leave it out the rest of the week while I am prepping all the cake. And then usually it gets wrapped and stored away by Friday night, because I'm typically done by Friday night. So you can leave it out. Lauren says 2 weeks. I don't do it that long. Jen, how long do you leave yours out?
I use a cooked syrup, and from my Department of Agriculture, it is room temp stable for 12 hours.
Yeah, so I guess you should probably figure that out for where you live and your licensing laws and things like that. So we're still working out on ours here in California, so it is.
But honestly, my family has eaten it after it's been out for 2 or 3 days, and they're all alive and kicking, so.
Right. You won't die if you leave it out for longer than a couple of days, promise. Now, as far as will it hold up in the heat, I have a clause in my contract that cakes are to be left out in temperature 75 degrees or lower. However, if you have a Swiss meringue cake and you have fondant over it, it tends to do fairly well in higher temperatures. Jen can actually speak more to that because she solely uses Swiss meringue and she's in very humid, hot Virginia. So can you talk about leaving how stable Swiss meringue is in the heat, Jen?
Well, I deliver them in the heat, outdoor weddings all the time in the summer. Generally, if it is going to be hot and humid like it is in the summer here in Virginia, I recommend that it has to be fondant covered if it's going to be outside. If they want to take the chance and not have it fondant covered, I mean, there is a sign-off, a temperature sign-off in my contract as well. But I've never had an issue 90 degrees, 95 degrees, even up to 100 degrees. I just make sure that I deliver my cakes very cold out of the refrigerator. I deliver them stacked. I know I'm in the minority, but I deliver them stacked, and they are rock solid chilled, and so I time my deliveries in hot, humid Virginia so that they come to room temperature by the time they're cutting. So I usually will deliver them within, I would say 5 hours of the cutting time if the planner has a timeline, which is usually about an hour before the ceremony begins.
Well, there you have it, people. A square cake. How does that look, Jen?
Absolutely gorgeous, my love.
I'm going to put this in the freezer for a little bit, and I'm going to prep my fondant while we talk and answer more questions. Okay, so I'm just prepping a little bit because we're running a little long on time. Is there any other questions that we can answer?
No, but Lisa Randolph did say that she let hers sit out for 1.5 weeks just as a test, and it did get mold on it after 1.5 weeks.
Oh. Well, that's no good. Yeah, we don't want to do that.
So I think your thoughts on a few days is probably best.
Yeah, you know, I don't typically have my buttercream out longer than really, honestly, 2 days. And after figuring out that I don't need to use buttercream to glue my cakes together when I tier them, I just go ahead and wrap my my buttercream up. Oh, do you guys want to see a way I wrap my buttercream? You'll love it. Okay, so this is my trick, and this is also a really good trick for piping when you want to pipe with anything. You're going to take a sheet of plastic wrap, a dollop of buttercream. Now, if you wanted to do a two-tone buttercream, you could do a dollop of one color, and then you can do another dollop right next to it in the other color. You're going to fold over one side, fold over the other side, grab it at the ends, and spin your bag. Fold over one, you feed this one through your piping bag. Well, actually, I cut mine first, and then I feed the cut in into my piping bag and pipe away. Or you can just do a bunch of these and then store them in a Ziploc for storage purposes. It's a little bit, maybe not so environmental friendly, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. So here's my fondant. I'm gonna prep my fondant while my cake is chilling, so we can move on to the next step. This is Liz Merrick's fondant. I've only used Liz Merrick's recipe with satin ice fondant. I've never used it with Wilton, so I can't speak on how it does with the new Wilton recipe, I guess, for fondant. So you can use it for, or with satin ice, or I guess any other pre-made fondant. Or you could be like Jen and just use straight marshmallow fondant. I panel my cakes, and paneling is basically cutting your fondant in sections. I do have a how to panel a round cake and fondant on YouTube, so you can go look that up. But for square cakes, it is a definite must to panel cakes for me, because those sharp edges, as you can see, will just rip and cut, and I don't know, I spent all that time making really nice sharp edges with the buttercream. I kind of like to keep them that way, so paneling really just helps with that. So with your fondant, when you panel, I actually don't need my fondant to be ultra stretchy. I actually like it to be a little bit stiff. I've heard of people adding chocolate to their fondant for that purposes. I haven't. I just use good old cornstarch to help kind of stiffen up my fondant. So what I'm going to do is roll out my fondant to about, and if I can get it down to an eighth, that is just a lovely thing. The less fondant on your cake, the better. Because you already have a lot of buttercream on that cake, and you just don't need to add another 1/4 inch of fondant. So roll your fondant thin, guys. It also saves you money. You still get the beautiful look of fondant without having a lot on there. I'd rather personally eat buttercream than fondant, so that's why I always prep my cakes with a lot of buttercream. So I'm just, remember with fondant, when you're rolling fondant, you always want to keep it moving so that's not sticking on you. And so I'm just doing that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my panels out. Checking to make sure it's not sticking. And a little bit more. Let me know if any questions pop up. I'm happy to answer.
Not currently. Although one person is saying, can you please remember to talk about sweat? I just hate it when that happens.
Yes, we will talk about sweat. We will talk about sweating now. Let me know, when are you talking about sweating? When you have fondant on your cake? What specifically about sweating is it that you want me to address?
I will let you know when that comes up.
Okay. All cakes, once you put them in the freezer or refrigerator, are going to, hold on for 1 second. I just realized my acrylics are on the cake. Oh, you guys know that 2 of you are going to win a set of these acrylics. Woohoo, 6 inches. I've got 2 sets for 2 lucky winners today. This is a brand new one, but I'm going to use yours for a second. This is a 6-inch cake acrylic, but I'm going to address the sweating. Just give me 1 second. My fondant is ready to cut, so I want to do that. Typically, when I'm going to panel a square cake, I use this set of acrylics that I use to buttercream it. So that's a 5.5 back there. We're just going to use this 6 because that's what I have on hand right now. So I typically will cut slightly larger than the acrylic, and I want to cut 5 panels. I may or may not have room for all 5. I'm actually cutting flush to this acrylic because it is larger than my actual cake because I'm using a larger size. So I'm cutting 5 panels right now, 1 for the top and 4 for the sides. Okay, so back to sweating. Yes, your cakes are going to sweat. A trick that I was told was if you set your dedicated refrigerator, hopefully you have a dedicated refrigerator, if you can set your dedicated cake refrigerator to the highest temp of 40 degrees, your cakes will not sweat as badly. The condensation will not sweat as badly. Also, you definitely don't want to fondant a cake that has been completely frozen or is frozen at the time of fondant covering. Don't do that. I did that. That is not good. Do I have 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. Woohoo! I have 5. Okay. So we're good. Jen, do you want to talk about your issues or lack thereof of sweating and fondant-covered cakes with buttercream?
I find that if on the off time that I use American buttercream, like when I did the baseball cap tutorial, I used American buttercream just because it was for my son and he likes fudge icing. It sweats more with American buttercream. I'm not sure why that is, but it just does. I refrigerate through all of the steps of my cake, and I just don't touch it once it's done. You can handle it for about 5 minutes out of the fridge when you're stacking or decorating before it starts to get tacky, and then I just will let it dry, put it back in, stack it. When I take them out, I deliver them stacked. They sweat a little bit. They glisten, I would say, but as long as you don't touch them, they'll dry fine. They will dry.
Yeah, I always store my cakes in the refrigerator.
Okay, so the person who asked that original question is now saying that she frosted a cake with SMBC, and when she took it out of the fridge, it was sweating, and then when she covered the cake right away with fondant, it was a mess. So it was sweating just buttercreamed.
How long did you have your cake in the refrigerator to chill before you put the fondant over it? If you only put your cake in the freezer or the refrigerator for 10 minutes and you have a warm cake, it is not chilled all the way through. If you are going to do the freezer, you can do probably a good 20 minutes in the freezer. It should be frozen pretty good or chilled pretty good all the way through. If you, let me look at my face. If you, I saw this on somebody posted this, that they put the cake in the refrigerator for 10 minutes and then they tried to fondant covered it and it became a mess. Your cake is not chilled all the way through. It's still room temperature, so to speak, throughout the cake. You want your buttercream, even in the filling part, chilled all the way through. So you're going to need to leave that cake in the refrigerator for at least a couple of hours. Would you say, Jen?
I leave mine typically overnight, but yeah, a couple of hours at least.
Yeah, exactly. Here's my schedule. Cake is due on Saturday. I'm either baking on Tuesday or Wednesday. 10 minutes out of the oven. They're wrapped in saran wrap in the freezer. An hour before I'm going to fill them, I will take them out of the freezer just enough for them to come cold but not frozen for me to tort them. I will make the buttercreams and fillings on Wednesday. I'm stacking and filling on Wednesday. After I stack, fill, and crumb coat, those cakes either go in the refrigerator overnight or freezer. If I'm doing the final coat like we're doing now, they'll typically go in the refrigerator and they stay there overnight. They are very chilled before I go to fondant cover them. After I do that, they go back into the refrigerator until each tier is ready to decorate. The cakes will then sit out for a period of time while I'm decorating, sometimes a couple of hours, at which point, as it's coming to room temperature, I will see if an air pocket is developing that I need to address. Maybe stick a straw through to create a hole for the air to escape. But typically, my cakes are always chilled when I'm doing the next covering, either the next buttercream covering or the next fondant covering. They're not frozen with fondant, but they are chilled. So there is a little bit of sweating, but like Jen addressed, it's a little bit. It shouldn't be over condensating where it's dripping. And if you're having trouble with your buttercream staying in place while you're doing the fondant covering, more than likely you did not let that cake chill long enough. So I'm going to move on. Keep asking. I'll keep talking while I'm going to show you how to take the acrylics off. Okay, so I have my cake out. It's solid to the touch. I have a cup of hot water with my knife in it. And what I'm going to do is carefully, I'm going to start at a corner and slide my knife between the acrylic and the buttercream and cut that. And I'm just sliding ever so gently to release that bottom acrylic. And it pops right off. I like to go and clean up my edge here, scraping down the excess of buttercream that got under there. Clean, clean, clean. Heat up my knife again. And now what I'm going to do is slide between the prep board and the acrylic, not the acrylic and the cake. I just want to make sure that the acrylic is not stuck to the bottom cake board. So I'm making sure it's able to move. I'm going to take another non-skid, place that on top. A second prep board, or this could even be your cake display board also, especially if you're going to do a buttercream finish. That way you can have a really clean line and you don't have to worry about transferring at least the bottom cake to your cake display board. But for now, this is just another prep board. Flipping it over. Release. Take that off. I'm going to center this a little bit. And then I'm going to take off the second acrylic the same way we did the bottom, carefully finding where the buttercream and the acrylic meet. And if you did a good job cutting your parchment paper, you should have very little exposed buttercream actually touching your acrylic. And there we go. Pop that right off. Take off, peel off my parchment and discard of that. Let me show you what the top of the cake looks like after you do that. So we've got some holes to fill in, but not much. The cake is already level, so we don't want to add too much. So really just a good skimming across the top. And just filling in. I am coming over my edge, but my cake is very chilled. So that's okay right now, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm just cleaning up, filling in holes, getting a nice smooth surface. I am going back. I can't find my one. I'll use this one. Back with my bench scraper to clean up both top and bottom edge. Gently, gently, oh so gently. We don't want to mess up our work. I'm going to pull back and just pick up any extra buttercream that has come over the sides. And that's it, you guys. That is it. There is a little bit of some, like right here. You can try to feather that in, or you can pop this back in the refrigerator or freezer, let it chill up some more, and then you can actually cut it off with a knife. You can just trim it off, any of that. But we're going to move on. I'm going to show you how to panel your fondant. So you get a nice blade. Some people use surgical scalpels. Whatever works for you, just make sure it's new. That's a brand new blade. You can get them in a box of 100. I'm going to start with placing the top piece of fondant. So I've already cut out my fondant. You see there's plenty of overhang. I'm going to smooth down the top. I did not put water because Swiss meringue, you don't need to put water on your cake to get your fondant to stick. If this was a crusting buttercream, then again, I don't have a lot of experience with crusting buttercream, but I would assume you would need to spritz this with water. If this was ganache, you would have to brush it with some warm water. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim my fondant flush. I have a wet paper towel here so I can clean my blade. I'm going to find the edge, and I always say, get over your cake and let me see some cleavage. because you want to make sure you're over it. And I'm carefully running my blade right along the side of the cake and trimming off that fondant. Flush. Wiping my blade clean. Doing my best. I am kind of moving fast. Our time is long. To maintain the sharp edges of our cakes. This is how I cover all of my squares. Some people think it takes longer. I disagree. Because you'll see I do very little maneuvering of the fondant or manipulating the fondant to get it clean. So I have another piece here. You can use your acrylic to help you get this piece on the cake. So you lay your fondant where the back side is going to be touching the cake. Find a side. We'll start here. And then use your acrylic to lay that piece on. Smooth it in. Using your, and I like a clean edge on the bottom of my cake as well. So I'll make sure that is clean all the way down to the bottom. Getting my blade again. Finding the top first. Now I have to, I don't normally do this on a turntable, so I'm going to use my belly to keep it from moving on me. And I trim that all the way off. And I'll show you that top edge. Can you see that, Jen?
I can.
Okay. I know it's white. We're back to white. I apologize. So, and then I'm just going to go to each side and trim flush. And being very careful not to dig into, but you see how quickly that cut is using a fresh blade. So now here's, so you did one side. We're flush, my corners are good. I'm going to panel the direct opposite side of that. So we line it up. Again, you can use your acrylic to help you with that. You can also freeze your panels if you like for a few minutes. That's always easy too. We just don't have time for that. I am a pink mess right now. Okay, is there any questions while I am?
We have one. When making your buttercream, you color it at what? And you color it. At what point do you add the coloring?
When it's completely done. When I've got my flavor in it, the whole recipe is finished. You can color it thin and just add enough gel color to your liking, and that's that. Or I like to leave it white and then batch it out depending on how many colors I need and color different batches. Okay, so we have 3 panels on. So now these exposed panels will be either front or back. So I'm going to pick the other side. And the reason why we do this is that you'll have at least 2 sides to choose from, because there will not be, and you'll see in a minute, there will not be an exposed seam. You will not see a seam from looking at the cake straight on. You will have a front and a back and 2 sides. So it's probably best to look at your cake before you start paneling to figure out what looks pleasing to be the front of your cake, meaning if your cake is not level, but it looks level on one side, then that's going to be your front. But hopefully if you've done everything correctly, you won't have that problem and you'll have 4 great sides to choose from. I don't know how quickly you see that I'm doing this, guys, but it's really pretty fast, and I already have sharp corners. I am not having to get in there with 2 smoothers and tap, 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 tap. I'm already sharp. Last one. Nope. Let's go this way. Again, you can use, it's probably best to use your acrylics, or like I really like to use is freezing them. Did we answer the sweating question? I felt like maybe I don't know if we did or not. So whoever asked that, if you can just clarify that we answered it for you.
We have one more question. It says, will it be easier to cut the fondant if it's cold?
Yes, it is easier, but however, I don't know if you guys are seeing how easy I'm cutting my fondant. I mean, I'm just dragging through, and that's because of 1, good fondant, 2, a clean and fresh blade. I don't know if you've seen me cleaning my blade, but if you've got dried up fondant on your blade, you're going to get a jaggedy cut. So make sure that each time you make sure your blade is clean. And I'm not sawing. I don't know if you guys see that. You don't see me doing this. I'm not sawing. I'm going straight down, straight across. So here's the last one, guys. No sawing. The only thing I have to come back and do is pinch up my corners at the top, because when I do, that's the only thing about these blades. I heard that the scalpels don't drag and pull, so maybe a different blade will help with that. When I do cut, sometimes it drags and pulls that edge down, so I just go back and just, like right here, I just push that back in, and we have a finished buttercream and fondant covered cake. Do we love it?
We love it.
Look at that top.
Perfect.
It's perfection. Dare I try the leveler? Dare I try the leveler?
That is gorgeous.
I'm a little nervous. We look good. We're ready to move on. Did you love that, Amber? Have you fondant covered your buttercream squares?
I have not, and that is amazing, and I love it, love it, love it. I love how square it is. I think it's awesome to do the panel method. I think you could also drape it with the fondant if you wanted to, but I think it might lose those sharp edges a little bit more. But I think it's amazing. It just looks like you took a mold and went zoop, and it just came out perfect.
Yeah, I will say, if you do ganache, you have to, you can cover it in one piece a little bit better, because the ganache just really firms up nicely, and you can really maneuver and get in there. But why not panel? Did you see me sweat? How fast was that? You do have to practice with that the razor sharp cutting, but I'm not doing it the other way, honestly. Oh, this is what else I want to show you. Here's the front. Oh, let me lift it up. Just to show you. Again, it's white. I apologize. There's no seam here. So this is either a front or a back, so I have two choices. This one, or this one. Also, look how clean that bottom is. That is a clean, clean, clean.
That is a clean, clean, clean.
Here is the side. You can see a seam there, and you can see a seam here. So that's why you do one side, then the opposite, before you do your front or your back. Looking at your cake before you go to Covered in Fondant to say, it looks straight this way, so that's got to be my front. Mark that with a little X or something, and make sure that's the last one you panel.
Amber Adamson at Top Tier Cakes for all occasions.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us today. Thank you, Jen, for helping me out. I love you. And if you guys have any other questions about anything that you've seen today, leave it on the bottom of the video feed, and I'll answer, or email me info@sifbycara.com, and I'll be happy to answer. And look out for more tutorials. Thanks for joining me. Everybody say goodbye.